I'm a bit of a Luddite with the technology, but I'm glad it's finally working. My name is Esi Edugyan, and I'm the author of Half-Blood Blues and Washington Black. I've been asked a lot lately what I've been reading while we're all cooped up. And I've been reading so many things, a lot of historical fiction, but a lot of contemporary stuff. And the thing I'm currently reading is a book of essays by Leslie Jameson called Make It Scream, Make It Burn. And she's just a truly beautiful writer, just utterly gorgeous. And one of the most interesting pieces for me was a piece called Sim Life, which I don't know if some of you remember the virtual reality platform Second Life, which was a big thing back in the aughts, I remember. You could log on and create an entire virtual life for yourself, in which you had, a virtual spouse and virtual children who were people, maybe in other parts of the world who, your child could be like a 35-year-old woman, living in New Jersey, this kind of thing. So it was a really fascinating experiment in a way, and people thought it would just take over real life, but it ended up fizzling out. But she does a bit of a piece on it that ends up being a meditation on escapism. So I just wanted to read you apart from that. One evening, during the earliest days of my Second Life exploration, I stood with my husband outside a barbecue joint in offline Lower Manhattan and asked him, why isn't Second Life just as real life? At first, he said nothing. He just reached over and pinched my arm, quite hard actually. Then he said, that's why it's not as real. His point wasn't just about physicality, the ways that our experiences are bound to our bodies, but about surprise and disruption. So much of lived experience is composed of what lies beyond our agency and prediction, beyond our grasp, beyond our scripts. So much dwells in surprise, in otherness, in missteps and unforeseen obstacles and the textures of imperfection, the grit and grain of a sidewalk with its cigarette butts and faint summer stench of garbage and taxi exhaust, the possibility of a rat scuttling from a pile of trash bags, the lilt and laughter of nearby strangers' voices. Second Life promises another reality, but can't fully deliver the rifts and fissures that give reality its grain. In Second Life, landscapes often look like Thomas Kincaid paintings. Sex exists in the imagination. Parenting happens when you choose to log on. A 2011 study found that people attributed more idealized personality traits to their Second Life partners than to their offline partners, ranking them higher in extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. Intimacy between two avatars isn't unreal, but its reality is different from what happens when two people find themselves enmeshed in a relationship in the physical world. When the self has to stand behind the words she has spoken, or the secrets that she has disclosed, when she has to inhabit the daily constancy of her home. In the perfected landscapes of Second Life, I remember what a friend had once told me about his experience of incarceration. Having his freedom taken from him meant not only losing access to the full range of the world's possible pleasures, but also losing access to the full range of his own possible mistakes. Maybe the price of a perfected world, or a world where you can ostensibly control everything, is that much of what strikes us as experience comes from what we cannot forge ourselves, and what we ultimately cannot abandon. In Second Life, as elsewhere offline, AFK stands for Away from Keyboard, and during the course of his ethnographic research, Tom Bolstorff sometimes heard residents saying that they wished that they could go AFK in the actual world to escape uncomfortable situations, but knew that this was not possible. No one ever says AFK in real life. This sentiment inspired what Bolstorff calls the AFK test. If you can go AFK from something, that something is a virtual world. Perhaps the inverse of the AFK test is a decent definition of what constitutes reality. Something you can't go AFK from. Not forever, at least. Philip Rosedale predicted that the physical world would become a kind of museum. But how could it? It's too integral to our humanity ever to become obsolete. Too necessary to these imperfect, aching bodies that we use to lumber through it. Did I find wonder in Second Life? Absolutely. When I sat in a wicker chair on a rooftop balcony, chatting with a legally blind woman who had built herself a house overlooking the crashing waves of Cape Serenity, I found it moving that she could see the world of Second Life better than our own. When I rode horses through a virtual Yosemite, I knew that the woman leading me through the pines had spent years on disability, isolated from the world, before she found a place where she no longer felt sidelined. That's what is ultimately liberating about Second Life. Not its repudiation of the physical world, but its entwinement with that other world, their fierce exchange. Second Life recognizes the ways that we often feel more plural and less coherent than the world allows us to be. Some people call Second Life escapist, and often its residents argue against that. But for me, the question isn't whether Second Life involves escape. The more important point is that the impulse to escape our lives is universal and hardly worth vilifying. Inhabiting any life always involves reckoning with the urge to abandon it, through daydreaming, through storytelling, through the ecstasies of art and music, hard drugs, adultery, a smartphone screen. These forms of leaving aren't the opposite of authentic presence. They are simply one of its symptoms. The way that love contains conflict, intimacy contains distance, and faith contains doubt. And this is, for those of you who are late joining, that was from Sim Life in Leslie Jameson's collection, Make It Scream, Make It Burn. And I just thought it was, just so beautifully stated, this tension between wanting to fully inhabit a moment, but also wanting to escape from it. And, the way that she grapples with that, it's like she's like offering this beautiful permission for us. And I thought that, that felt really relevant to what's going on now. Just that, obviously there is that desire to be present and to mark this moment, but also a desire to escape it, and that's okay sometimes to want to escape our lives. Does anybody have any questions? Anyone? No? Oh, okay. Here's a question. How are you keeping busy with your kids at this time? It's been 3 weeks now that we've been at home because we had spring break as well. We've been doing a lot of baking. Although it's getting harder to find flour, you sort of go into grocery stores and feel we're living in an apocalyptic moment with the shelves all cleared out. But we've been baking, we've been doing a lot of workbooks. Their teachers are online, so we've been doing a bit of online schooling and chatting with classmates. We walk in the forest a lot. We're fortunate enough to live a little bit outside of town and a little bit more remotely. So we go in the forest and they play a game whenever they see another person, they turn around and run the other way, which is very sweet. But I guess we'll have to reprogram when everything is over. It's been a really, I guess, in some sense it's a difficult time, but in a lot of ways it's allowed us to pause in our lives and really reconnect because their schedules and our schedules, of course, were so hectic, and we have the luxury of being able to take the time with them, I guess. So another question: are any book recommendations for this time? Yeah, I've been reading so many different things. for a time, I returned to the classics. So I reread Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, which has always been a favorite of mine, and found that very comforting. And I've just returned to Middlemarch by George Eliot, which I think is very fitting, because it's essentially a novel about what it means to try and live the most, the most moral life. What does it mean to live a good life, and what compromises have to be made? But it's also a novel that's full of humor as well. So I adore that. But I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. Jameson's essays. I'm reading Marguerite Duras' The War, which is basically her diaries from occupied Paris. So that's been fascinating. And I just started Hilary Mantel's Bring Up the Bodies, because I hadn't read that before, and so I'm reading that with a view to reading obviously her newest one. Here's another question. How do you feel about your schedule changes? So this is from Ian Williams, I think. Yeah. You enjoy travel, or are you glad for some time off planes? Yes. I really enjoy traveling and being out and about in the world, but I was getting quite tired. So, 3.5 weeks ago, I was in Pittsburgh and Indianapolis, and on the day that I was leaving, that was basically the day I think that Trump was telling people that they had to return from Europe, and so the airports were chaos, and I remember this. But what struck me was that I think I'd watched CNN that morning, and there were 1,600 cases that had been, official cases of coronavirus in the United States 3.5 weeks ago. That was the number. And I remember I was speaking with a biomathematician, and she was saying to me, oh, but that number is very low. It's not representative. It would be closer to something like 10,000 cases. And I remember being astonished at that number. And 3.5 weeks later, it's, that number is nothing. It's been truly terrible and astonishing to watch. And, I think just taken great comfort within my family and reading and writing and having this moment to just pause and think about things. It's been a relief not to have to travel. How does having an MFA help you as a writer? It helps immensely, actually. It's having an MFA, it wasn't so much the fact of the degree as it was going through the process of doing workshops. I think it's hugely important to go through that process because it helps you to accept feedback later on from editors. That's actually, that's a skill. It's hard to take rough criticism, but to be able to do that and then, use it constructively to go back into your work, that's, it's an invaluable skill to acquire. So that was really important. And also, if you intend to teach or you want to teach, you have to have an MFA. Any other questions? I feel as though I've missed several, so I'm going to scroll back. Oh, have you started writing your next novel? I'm just starting to write my new book. I've spent a lot of time on the road. I was writing a lot of journalism as well. I've just finished a piece, or just finishing up a piece this week. And then I will be turning my sights back to writing novels, which is something I feel like I haven't done in a while. And I'm excited to go back to that. But I won't say what it's about yet. Okay, have you used an emotion thesaurus? I do not know what an emotion thesaurus is, so I would say no. Okay, and I'll take one last question, which was, what has winning the Scotiabank Giller Prize meant to your career? And it has been hugely life-changing, obviously. You know, I went, before I did Half Blood Blues, I was somebody with a very small readership and was basically on the verge of never being published again. And to win the prize just, you know, utterly changed my trajectory and sent me in the opposite direction. So it's been enormous, and I'm so grateful. Well, thank you so much.